Hello and welcome. I'm Nadia Giordana, and you're watching Talk to the Author. My guest today is Betty B. Passick. She's a wonderful author. She writes historical crime fiction. We're here today to talk about her current book, Gangster in Our Midst, which is very exciting, and I want to hear more about the inner workings of how this novel came about. That makes it even more exciting when I read the book, and I think you'll feel the same way. Let's go talk to Betty. Betty, welcome to the show.
Thanks, Nadia. Fun to be here today.
Well, I've been waiting to talk to you, so this is very exciting for me. I've read parts of your book, and I'm looking forward to reading more of it. Historical crime fiction. What made you choose that genre?
Well, I'm a small Iowa girl, and when we moved from the farm to a small Iowa town in the 1950s, already around age 9, I thought of myself as a sleuth, a Nancy Drew of sorts. Isn't that amazing? I'd never read any of her books, but I thought of myself as a sleuth. This town didn't have any murders happening or any fantastical crime, but I still was doing sleuthing behind the scenes. For example, I listened in on people's conversations. I remember in the kitchen at a funeral one time where my aunts were all congregated washing dishes and cleaning up after a meal, and they were talking about my grandma, my dad's mother, and where I learned that and I thought nobody else knew this, because of my sleuthing, I learned that my grandma had to get married, whatever that meant. I had no idea what that meant, but I just thought sleuthing was the best thing in the world, to learn the intricacies of what was really going on, and really gave me an inside world to the lives of the people around me. So that's kind of how I got into the idea that I was a sleuther. And fast forward to 2016, so many years later, I retired from 3M company, and I decided I was going to write books in my retirement years. I remembered that my small town really did have a gangster living there for 60 years. His name was Louis LaCava, and the word on the street was he worked for Al Capone. But in 2016, when I went back to talk to some of these locals, nobody really seemed to know for sure whether it was fact or just folklore. So that's how I really got into writing historical crime fiction.
And the book, this first novel of yours, is titled Gangster in Our Midst. And great characters, by the way. How did you develop them?
Most of the characters are based on people from my hometown. I tell this story, it's based on a true story. I tell this story through FBI and police accounts, newspaper reporting, and a dozen people were still alive who had grown up during that era when Louis LaCava first came to our town. So one of them was Verlie Hahn. Her father was Bill Hahn, and he had been the town marshal from 1916 to 1947. So that whole duration, that when Louis LaCava first came to town, and she gave me great stories about when her father went hunting with Louis LaCava in the backwaters of the Wapsipinicon River. The two of them made day trips to Chicago. So you'll find one of those stories in the book. And then Verlie Hahn also worked in the Coffin Cafe, where Louis LaCava came in every day for breakfast when he was in town. So, I mean, so it's really, there's a lot of fact in it. Actually, I say all of the stories are factual. They just may not have happened exactly the way I tell them. So
That's what's so exciting, I believe, about historical fiction, since I'm a lover of history to begin with and fiction. But your book, that book, won a 2019 Top 100 Notable Indie Book Award. Do you have tips about how you went about gaining that award?
I do. You know, this was my first novel. I had written 2 other historical books. For one was my family's book of history. Because, you know, when I started writing, I didn't even know if I could write books. So I decided to write my family's book of history, and it turned out to be a 5-year project and was 400 pages long. So I decided I really could write books. I could assemble a lot of information, put it in a understandable form over the generations, and that it made sense to everybody, including photos and genealogy and everything. So I never knew this about myself before, but I realized I could really write a book. So the Gangster book was my first attempt at writing a novel. And of course, that's entirely different. You're creating fictional characters. For example, in Gangster, in our midst, the town sheriff is 100% German. But I needed an Irishman to tell some of the story. So I changed him into an Irishman, a red-haired, blue-eyed Irishman, and gave him all the characteristics of an Irishman. And when he talked, he had Irish slogans that he used and referred to, and it was his way of thinking. And so that was just a lot of fun.
Oh, that I think for a writer, the process is more fun than everything that comes afterwards.
But you know, it's true. The book does take over.
Yeah.
You have an idea for a book, and then the characters just kind of start to dictate to you how to tell this story.
They tell you who they are.
So I wrote this, pardon?
They tell you who they are, don't they?
They do. So I wrote this book and published it in 2017. And I knew this was going to happen. As soon as it was published, more people from my hometown were going to approach me and tell me they had additional stories. So I welcomed those stories, but it meant doing a total rewrite of the book. So that was in 2018, and I wanted to make sure this was the best book I could possibly put out. So I asked a couple of my WOW Women of Words members from the Twin Cities and asked them to look at this book and help me edit it. And they were Connie Anderson and Gloria Van. I'll just use her abbreviated name. And so without their help, I'm pretty certain this book would never have won an award. So, you know, writing books is a humble thing to do, and we need to find the people and the resources that can help us put out as good a book as possible. Then I submitted this book for an award, and wow, I was shocked that it won this award for being a first novel. But you know, you never do these things yourself.
Well, those ladies, I know both those ladies. They're fantastic.
They are. They are.
And your book is too. I'm so glad you have the award. I'm wondering if there's something I haven't asked you yet that you'd like to talk about with regard to this book or writing in general.
Well, I was really encouraged. The very first weekend that I launched this book, and I had 3 book events, I sold $1,000 worth of books in three engagements. And granted, this was the area around my hometown in Iowa, which is Fairbank, Iowa. And so these people had a vested interest in wanting to read this book. But in the first 12 months, then I sold over $5,000 worth of books, which is, I'm told by other authors that that's a milestone in itself. So, so anyway, I'm working on a prequel to Gangster in Our Midst. I have 2 more books in me. So it'll be a trifecta when I'm all done, I believe. I don't know that I have any more stories, but who knows what will pop up. But I'm working on a book to be released in the spring sometime.
And with about 3 minutes left, do you have any tips for other writers who may not have yet ventured into the novel arena, whether it be historical fiction or another kind of novel? Things that you learned about writing a full-fledged novel that you'd like to share?
Gosh, I feel like I've learned so much in writing my first novel. First of all, my first edition was not perfect. And people told me it wasn't. I had some surface errors in the book. I had gone through it a gazillion times myself, but you know how that goes. So I was grateful when people came to me and they had other stories, because it gave me an attempt to do a second edition. And if I was going to publish a second edition, I wanted it to be worthy of people spending the money to buy this book and read it. When I asked for help from my members of the Women of Words group here in the Twin Cities. And so my words of wisdom are, and I also changed the cover because I thought it was my handmade cover. I had a local artist in my hometown draw a picture for the front cover. And while that was just wonderful, and I really appreciate it, on Amazon, the book wasn't doing as well as it could be. When I asked for people's to tell me what was right and what was wrong about the book, they did. I made those changes. I hired a professional designer to design the cover, and I'm told that the book is really good inside and out. So my words of wisdom are, if your first attempt at the book aren't all that you hoped it would be, figure out how to stick with it and figure out what needs to change and keep working on it, because that's what I did, and it's really a book that I'm very proud of. And I have a lot of people, a lot of groups that are reading it for book clubs. And it's a good source for book clubs because it spans from the early 1900s till the 1980s, when the gangster finally dies of natural causes, I might add. But it's really a fun story. Whether you're from a hometown, a small hometown in Iowa or in the Midwest or anywhere else, I think most people can relate to the characters, and I hope they find it just a fun read.
I think they will, Betty, and thank you so much for being on the show today. This is a delight. I know the readers will enjoy your book. And thank you everyone else for watching the program today. We'll see you next time on Talk to the Author with a brand new guest.